Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there and welcome back. It is your host, Cesar Espino. You can find me at www.CesarRespino.com and welcome to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Today I have a special guest. Her name is Courtenay Turner. Hey, Courtenay, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Great, awesome. Before I get started, let me just give our viewers and listeners a little bit of your background, okay? So Courtenay was born with congenital rubella syndrome. Her mom was told that the best she could do was to find an institution for Courtenay to spend her life. Now she's passionate about the ability of movement to heal and helping others develop resilience in the face of adversity. That's amazing. So for the people that don't know, what is congenital rubella syndrome? I cannot even pronounce that.
Yes, congenital rubella syndrome. So congenital means that it's with birth. So my mom had the German measles, rubella. So some people may be familiar with the MMR vaccine. The R stands for rubella, which is the German measles. My mom had the German measles during the first trimester of pregnancy, which often renders the children with several complications. A lot of them don't fare very well. Many don't survive. So all things considered, I was very, very lucky.
Yeah, definitely.
However, there were several complications, as you had mentioned. They told mom the best she could hope was to find an institution for me. Yeah. Some of the complications included, I'm blind in one eye. I was born with a cataract in one of my eyes. I have a bilateral hearing impairment. It's very significant, but we didn't know until I was almost 6 years old. I learned how to speak by reading lips. So when I was almost 6, we got hearing aids, which I wear in both ears bilaterally.
Gotcha.
Tremendous help for me.
Yeah.
But I do still depend quite a bit on reading lips. So, now with the math, it's very challenging for me.
Yeah, definitely.
But I was born with hypotonia. So that's a condition where the muscles don't develop. So I was born with hypotonic limbs. I had heart surgery when I was a year old. Some of the other things were asymmetrical bone development. I was missing 10 teeth. I had fine and graphic motor impairment. So it was definitely a lot of challenges.
Yeah, and definitely. And one thing that I can, maybe I want to get your input on this is that definitely growing up was not easy, right? There was a lot of challenges that you have to overcome growing up. And so would you say to you that as you were growing up, did you feel like you were different than anybody else? Or how was that, besides going through all these different things, internally, from a mental perspective, how was that, either affecting you or not?
So that's a really great question. And I think my answer is probably a little bit different than what some people might expect. Mm-hmm. From a very young age, I had my mom and my grandfather were very, very supportive and very much instilled this, you can do whatever you put your mind to kind of attitude in me. And I was a very determined, self-motivated type of personality. And I was also actually very social, very outgoing. So I didn't, as a very young kid, and, psychology talks about this, how, we get socialized, right? So a lot of times we don't know necessarily how different we are until we've had enough socialization to understand what the rest of the world is like and how we can differ from them. So from a very young age, in fact, The Little Engine That Could was one of my favorite books. And that was really just how I went about life. You know, I think I can. Whatever I wanted to do, I thought I could. And so I went for it. And as I got a little bit older, right around, that age when you start to define your personality, around 7, I would say, is when I started to, and I also entered different school. So I started to really have much more of a sense of, other kids didn't feel like I was like them. And so I had much more difficulty, assimilating into the groups, and which was very difficult for me because I had been very social. I had a big group of friends in my preschool, my nursery school, and that became very challenging. The kids can be really mean,
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, I had somebody else on the show a couple of weeks back. They were talking about, exactly that, like the bullying that happens in school. And then not only that, even now as adults, that also happens a lot, and we just don't see it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of for you going through that, like, what were some things that you did to kind of overcome that and surpass that, right? Because definitely, like you said, kids could be very difficult, and not so much, within you. Yet, how do you deal with that, or how do you deal with that yourself?
So it's interesting. Again, I'll talk about kind of like the first grade, and then after. So in pre-first grade, when I didn't have hearing aids yet, I got hearing aids like late kindergarten. So when I was in nursery school, I definitely, didn't speak necessarily the way everyone else did. And so, but I had a very vivid imagination. So I created something called Bubble Land. And this was my world. I was obsessed with bubbles, like most kids are.
Yeah.
And so you had to blow bubbles to get there. But you couldn't get there unless you were invited by me. And what's fascinating about it is that we all spoke gibberish. But children are masters of improv. So the main principle of improv is yes and. You never say no but or what is that. They don't reject the premise. And so everybody just went along with it. And what was so fascinating was that we all understood each other. So I kind of, if I wasn't necessarily readily accepted into their world, I invited them into mine. And that was my coping strategy. When I transitioned into first grade, and it was definitely a new environment, and it was more challenging to make friends. How did I overcome it? I don't really know. It's a really difficult question because I was dealing with, some of my own physical challenges that I had to deal with. And first grade was actually when I went to speech therapy for the first time. We always had spelling tests. And I got 100 on every spelling test.
Yeah.
And then, it was every week we had a spelling test. And then finally, there was one week where we had the SHCH chapter. And so share. And I still remember it today. Like my teacher sat me down and she kept saying, because I failed the test. And, I had gotten hundreds on all of them. She was very confused. And she said to me, share. And I could not differentiate the two. So there were definitely some of those kind of challenges that I was already dealing with. And then to deal with the children, I was just very hurt. And I think my way of coping was I started to really retreat. And I also found one thing my parents always told me, and this is something that even today I always remind myself, is that it's so much more important to have one true friend than it is to, be Miss Popularity, so to speak, that to have a whole bunch of acquaintances wasn't really as important in life. And so that is really, when you ask me how did I cope with the bullying, I think that was one of the strategies, was to find somebody who was, I guess, like an ally, somebody who I could form a close bond with. And that is something I've always done in my life. I've always had people who were very close, intimate friendships, even if there weren't a whole bunch of acquaintances where I necessarily felt like I fit in.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I love that you mentioned, and I wish, I think a lot as adults, we miss out on this. And you were talking about the imagination, right? Creating your own bubble land and, just kind of going through that. And when you think about it from that perspective, again, we as adults tend to forget that imaginary side of our brain. And because of that, we can also limit ourselves, right? In terms of what we're capable of doing. And as a kid, like, a lot of times, again, if especially like in your case where they told you can do anything you want, right, and you continue to grow with that idea, then you come up with these ideas. And as a kid, many kids have a magnificent imagination, right? And if we were to take that and be that vulnerable from that perspective into the adulthood, I think that we can definitely create more for ourselves. So I really love the fact that you grew with that idea or that mindset, because I'm sure that was a big factor, in your life. I would imagine, growing up.
Tremendous. And actually, it's very interesting that you say that, because the timing of when I was born was kind of unique. It was a little bit too late for the rubella clinics, but it was, also too early for the modern medicine. So I was in that weird time, and there was only one clinic left. It was the Roosevelt Institute in New York City, and I had gone. A lot of doctors were saying, I told you, they said to find an institution, but there were a lot of doctors who really didn't think there was much hope. They also thought that I might not only have all the physical challenges, but that that there was a possibility I could be autistic, mentally challenged, and the Roosevelt Institute, one of the reasons that a lot of these people thought that was because my way of learning was to mimic the world around me. I did a lot of also hand gesturing, because one eye was seeing, the other eye isn't. I have these pictures and I can see it. I'm holding these objects here, and then I'm holding objects here, trying to figure this out. And you can see that's what I'm doing. But they perceive that as an autistic coping strategy, as opposed to it being me trying to figure out my visual impairment. And I say all this to get to the point of that the Roosevelt Institute didn't see my mimicking and my play as a deficit. They said that was the indication for them that I was going to be okay. They told my mom that she's got such a vivid imagination. That's her coping strategy, and she's going to be fine.
Yeah. Again, another great point. And even looking back to maybe all of the other people or doctors or whatever that might have been that said, she's going to be this and there or that, or needs to be in an institute, or they start labeling you or want to label you in such a way. And I like what Les Brown mentioned, and he said, don't let somebody else's opinion about you dictate your future, right? And in this case, you your mom or yourself didn't allow a opinion of somebody else's, well, let's label her as such, or let's do this, or whatever the case may be. That didn't stop you from really becoming your true you, right? Your true purpose. And a lot of times when we go through that, again, we as people are always looking for validation. We're always looking for somebody else to come in and give us or provide us with some sort of authority or some sort of guidance, right? And sometimes that might not be the best thing for us, yet we allow that to influence our decision, right? And that can be very risky, specifically if you're going through some very not so easy times, that if you allow that to happen, it can really handicap you for the rest of your life. And I'm glad that that was not the case with you, where your artistic side of it, your imagination got you through a lot of the things you were going through in life.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, in terms of high school and even maybe going to college, if you went to college, what was your idea? Like, what going through all of this in your life, like, what were you thinking about? Like, I want to be this person, or I want to grow up and be in this proficiency or in this industry. Did you have anything in mind?
So, yeah, then it was probably very different than where I am now.
Yeah.
And maybe not. I've actually done a lot of thinking about this recently, because I actually don't think it is all that far off. It's just less traditional. So as a very little child, I was fascinated by astronomy. I wanted to be an astronaut, actually.
Nice.
My dad told me I wasn't tall enough, which I actually don't think is true. I think that they prefer smaller for the,
for the ships or for whatever. Yeah.
So that plan didn't work out. But as I went through high school and college, my mom had gone back to school to become a psychologist when I was very young. Around 6, she started to think about it, and we actually had a whole conversation about it. I remember it like it was yesterday. And because I had spent so much time with her, being in and out of hospitals for surgery and whatnot, we were very, very close. And I would say my mom, really was my best friend growing up. And I felt like I lost her. So when she started to go back to school, I started to study a lot of her material so that I'd have an excuse to talk to her.
Nice.
So I was 9 and I was reading Freud and I was reading, Psychology Today. And then I'd say, I'll help you study. And I became very interested in psychology. And I think also because of my unique set of circumstances in life, I was fascinated by the human experience, essentially, and human existence. Why are we here? So from a very early age, I became very interested in the existentialist philosophy. I kind of formulated my own philosophy. And in high school, I created several independent research projects. So I had I did an independent study in philosophy. I wrote several philosophical papers that my school published. And then my junior and senior year, I did dream analysis research. And I was actually the first junior to do any research of that kind. My high school actually published my research. My mentor was the founder of the Association for the Study of Dreams. So I had proposed a study my junior year to a hospital, Columbia Presbyterian. I wanted to, it would have been a human brain study. They pretty much laughed in my face, told me that it was a human brain study, and that I need an MD, PhD to conduct such a study, and that if I did, I most likely would get the Nobel Prize. I said, well, that's the plan. So I entered college as a neuroscience major, and when about halfway through, I ended up switching to philosophy. The two had always been of interest, and I ended up going in that direction. And then when I graduated, I went to Stella Adler and I pursued acting. So really, it's always just been the pursuit of the human experience. I'm fascinated from all angles, the metaphysical, the psychological, philosophical, and physiological. I do a lot now in the realm of health, fitness, nutrition, and that's, much more physiological. So yeah, it's really just, I'm fascinated by human beings and our relationship to the world around us and to each other.
Right. At which point in your journey of that did you more or less decide to do your own stuff and not be working for somebody else or doing any of that stuff?
So I had, I pursued acting for a while. Acting kind of led me into producing, and I had an experience when I had first graduated from college where Lifetime had asked to buy the rights to my life story. My immediate reaction was, unless I can be involved, no, and I ended up saying no because they wanted to buy the rights outright. Yeah, right. And even then I knew what that meant, and I felt like, what do you have? You don't own the rights to your life story, Yeah. So I didn't, and I think at the time I also had, I don't think I was ready for it. I think I spent so much of my life trying to overcome, I was mainstreamed. I never wanted to be pitied. I didn't want to be seen as different because I had been bullied. I had a lot of that experience imbued in me. So I felt like I wanted to just keep going about my life and not make that, the forefront. However, at some point, it was, I think, really after I had tried out for American Ninja Warrior. Didn't get picked to run the course, but I'm a big believer in any time there is, and I call it a perceived failure, because, I think in life, relationship to failure is a very interesting thing for human beings. That it's not that I don't think failure exists. I think that oftentimes we perceive obstacles and bumps in the road as being failure. And oftentimes they're really just a lesson or a way, a stepping stone to another path, you know? So, or an opportunity for growth. And I really did more in this process when I didn't get picked. I was really devastated, but I'm a believer in looking at what is it that, what lesson can be learned? And sometimes, a lot of the times, there's really hard lessons that you have to take a cold, hard look at. However, as much as I think that those are really valuable, I also think it's really important to find something positive you can take with you, because that's going to instill hope. That's going to help you move forward. So I did. I had to look at this and what am I going to learn from it? And the big takeaway was how inspired people were. And because I live my life every day, I don't find me all that inspiring. You know, I'm a little too close to the subject matter. So I started to think about all the athletes with disabilities who I find so inspiring. And that was really where I came up with the premise of my show, WIM, What is Movement? I had initially thought it would be a great vehicle for athletes with disabilities to inspire the world and how rewarding and validating it would be for them. But the more I started to talk to them, the more I realized they don't move in spite of, like you would think. They move because of. And I realized that's my premise. Is movement is healing for all human beings. And so I came up with my quote is, all human beings are designed to move. The ways in which we do are our unique creative expression. So all this to say that I feel very strongly that we all have our unique path. We all have challenges. That's one thing in life none of us are impervious to. That's part of the human experience. But I do think some of us have challenges, you know, and at different times, right? And other people can learn lessons from those challenges. So I think it was Tom Stoddard, who Leave the Light On, Celtics actor, who said that in life we either, I'm going to butcher the exact word, I'll paraphrase the wording, but you know, he said in life, in school, we learn lessons and then we're tested on them. In life, we're given tests and then we hope to learn the lessons from it. And the beautiful thing about humans is that we have the ability to learn lessons from art and other people's experiences. We don't always have to suffer ourselves. And I think that's tremendously powerful. So that was really a turning point for me, where I realized that through sharing my story and my experiences, would have the opportunity to help and inspire others. And that kind of set me on this path.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I really love what you mentioned about, you know, failure or perceived failures is a stepping stone for a new path or an opportunity. And I think that's critical, right? You know, perhaps some of the people that are listening to us or watching us, you know, this is one of those things where we have to be able to learn from that. And I love the fact that it is just a step towards an opportunity or something new. The second thing you mentioned, which I really enjoy, is the fact that we all have challenges, right? And you know, how we go, I always tell people the difference between what that challenge is going to do for us is how we do what we do with it, or what is our determination, right? So how we act on that challenge will determine our future, or will determine the next step, right? And a lot of people, sometimes they tend to just take the challenge for what it is and get stuck with it, or take that failure for what it is and get stuck with it and say, it is what it is, and don't do nothing about it. And that's the circumstances of that. And so just talking to you and seeing your energy is like, the first thing that's coming to my mind is like, what has been your motivating factor, or what have you had in your life that you really seem very positive, right? And you've clearly have gone through a lot, yet you're not letting that, you know, take the best of you. You know, you're not letting that failure, that perceived failure, or that challenge take the best of you. So what has been your motivating factor all these years?
So I love this question. And it's interesting because I think motivation in general is interesting, right? Motivation is fleeting, right? It's like a little dopamine hit. You know, you get a little rush and then you're like, okay, now what? what do I do now?
Yeah.
So I am not really, I think motivation is wonderful. I think inspiration is wonderful. And as human beings, we need it. However, I don't like to depend on it. So for me, I don't know that I have that I look for something to necessarily motivate me to keep going. But what I will say is this: I'm a huge fan of acknowledging gratitude. And there is so much research, quantifiable research, that shows how powerful gratitude is for our neurochemistry and for our future self-authorization, for our ability to define ourselves, for our ability to propel ourselves forward. And I think that that's actually what really does drive me, is that I know the odds that I've overcome. And as human beings, we are meaning-making creatures. So we all have different belief systems, right? And I'm not here to tell you what to believe in. Some believe in a sentient being, some, have, other universal higher beliefs. However, we all have a need to create meaning. We're not very good with dealing with just, this is random and chaotic, and we're just going to continue to go about and mill through it anyway, right?
Right.
So I believe that the way that we, move forward in life and have success in life is to attribute our own meanings, is to find our own purpose. And for me, what drives me forward is knowing the odds that I've overcome and knowing that I'm so grateful to be here. Life is we are such a tiny little blip on this universe, and it is an incredible experience. We're given so much opportunity, and it is really so incredible and amazing to think about that possibility. How random everything, I think it's something like 1 in a trillion possibility of a human being just being born.
Yeah, that's amazing.
We are really miracles. And I know that I have defied tremendous odds just to be here, and then to have overcome the things that I've overcome. And I want to prove that to myself that, I can do something with all of that, and that all of that was worthwhile. That struggle wasn't just here for me to suffer, because that's inevitable,
Yeah.
We're all going to have suffering, but we can all have tremendous joy and success and fulfillment, really. That's what I think of success as being, is fulfillment. And so for me, it's about attributing meaning to that suffering so that I can have personal fulfillment and hopefully in the process inspire and help others too.
Yeah. That's another thing that you just mentioned that stuck to my mind. And that is the personal fulfillment and to prove yourself, right? Sometimes I see this a lot with people, that they forget about ourselves or oneself, and then they are more focused on proving to somebody else or fulfilling somebody else's needs, and then they forget about doing that to their own body or mind, right? And that could be very tricky, and it could also be not very well perceived in your own life, right? And you've seen it in so many different cases, like, people that are making other people very happy, or people that are doing all these things for other people, yet in their own bubble or in their own life, they're going through some major challenges, right? And I like the fact that you mentioned that, because I think it's important to take note that one thing that I always say is make sure that the above and beyond anything, the person you have to prove to and the person that you have to answer to is that person that you see in the morning or in the night when you go to sleep in the mirror, which is yourself, right? And when we understand that, you actually have more that you can give to other people. It's like when you go on a plane, right? The first thing they tell you when the oxygen mask comes down is put that mask on yourself, because when you do that, you get consciousness, you understand, what's surrounding yourself. Now you can help out more people. If you do it the other way around, where you might help 1 or 2 people, or maybe not even anyone, because you lost the oxygen, you didn't put your mask on, you might not even help anyone, right? And so I think that's critical to take note. It's very, very important to have that.
So. I agree 100%. And I think, there's as human beings, we tend to like to do black and white thinking, right?
Right.
So people are like, oh, well, what everybody else thinks is so important, or, oh, don't worry at all about what other people think. And I think the truth lies somewhere in between, right? Because we're social creatures. So obviously you're not going to go through life completely disregarding the opinions of others.
Right.
That's just not realistic. And I don't know that would be healthy either. However, just like the oxygen mask analogy, you need to consider yourself first, because what is going to be fulfilling for you might not be the same as, the advice that others want to put onto you. And even people who love and care about you, they might have an idea of what's going to be good for you that isn't the same as what is important to you. So I think it is really important for us to take a look at ourselves first, to figure out what is who we are and who do we want to be, most importantly. And that is derived from who we've been. So
yeah. And you talked about gratitude. Besides gratitude, are there any other things that you do on a day-to-day basis to put you in a positive state of mind?
Absolutely. So movement is really huge for me.
Okay.
I would like to say I'm a really great meditator. I absolutely believe in the power of meditation. There's no shortage of research and evidence to support it, but I'm not great with stillness. However, moving meditation. So I feel like for me, I love going for long walks, and that's actually very meditative for me. There's yoga type things that I do that are meditative for me. That's moving meditation, and really just getting in it's different day to day. I'm a big believer of checking in with your body again, like, listening to yourself. And I'm not always motivated to do it. I was having this conversation yesterday with some clients actually, and they're like, how do you always stay motivated? And I don't. There are days I'm like, I don't feel like working out at all. I'm tired. Yeah. I'm just not feeling it. But I know what it does, not just for me physically, but mentally. The thing about movement is it's so concrete. And in life, we are up against so many challenges and things are so abstract. The world is full of chaos, really. And it is a way that we can prove to ourselves it's empowering. We can prove to ourselves, I did something hard today. I did something maybe I didn't feel like doing today. And after that, I think it becomes easier to take on other challenges for the day. So that's one of the things that's really big for me. Gratitude, movement, and then that support is really important. So, we've covered, internal support, but it's also really important to have support outside of you. Yeah. And this is something I talk about in my framework a lot, is that a lot of times we have those support networks already built into our life and we don't recognize them. We don't take advantage of them. But sometimes they're not there, or they're only there in certain areas of our life. And we need to go and seek them out in other areas so that we can, because we have lots of negative stuff going on inside. That's part of being human.
You don't even have to look for that. It's already here, right? Like the negative is right. I mean, you don't have to work for it.
So sometimes we need to, take a little outside perspective, and we need those people in our lives who are going to be supportive and remind us, hey, you're kind of in this negative echo chamber. Let's take a little step outside. And they can give you the perspective. So yeah, no, definitely. I want to talk a little bit about your program, or how you're helping other people develop that resilience life and face adversity, right? Can you talk more about that? What do you do with people? Yeah, so I have a framework that I go through, and I kind of have gone through a little bit with you. And I really like I do, I go. Certainly, like I have coaching that I work with people, but I also do speeches where I outline this stuff. And I don't always have the opportunity to, but when I do, I love to be able to perform aerial acrobatics along with the speech. And my reason for that is because I feel like it's such a great juxtaposition to look at what is possible when people said it wasn't, and it also encompasses a very key part of my message, which is the unique creative expression. I think as human beings, one of our intrinsic factors is that we are creative beings. And we're creative beings in so many different facets. We're creative in the fact that we create offspring and in our our way that we create physical things, we create art, we problem solve. And this is a huge part of what differentiates us both from other individuals and from other species. And so, yeah, I talk about how movement is a metaphor for life. And I touched a little bit on this just now with that it's very concrete. So a lot of people think of me as an athlete. I'm a CrossFit coach. I do aerial acrobatics. And well, all of that's true. And I love my physical training. For me, it's much more about the philosophical component of it. And what are the lessons that we can learn from movement? And so that is one of the things that I go through with people and I talk about in my speeches, because I think it's just such a great tool that almost everybody can use. It's something that no matter where you're at, if you can only if walking around the block is a challenge for you, you start there. You're going to learn a lot of lessons pushing yourself to get to the end of that block. And then what happens next week when you try and walk 2 blocks, right? And I use this as a really simple example, but for some people that is going to be a challenge. And it's how you face those challenges that they're a great mirror to show you how you're showing up in life and how you're handling challenges in life. So yeah, I do it through my coaching platform, which I have I call it the framework for building resiliency using movement mindset to overcome adversity. And I go through that in my speeches as well.
Nice. That's awesome. So you also do a lot of, do you do a lot of like public speaking?
Yeah, that was before.
Well, that's part of, yeah, right. Before this. Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. I have a couple of more questions for you before I let you go. One of them is, if people wanted to find more about you, connect with you, where can they do that?
Yes. So I would say the social media platforms are a really great place to connect with me. At Kinetic Courts on Instagram, at Courtenay Turner on Facebook, at Courtenay Turner on LinkedIn, and I'm on Twitter as well.
Nice. Awesome. And
I would think that the Instagram is probably the best place.
The best one.
Instagram, that's probably the first place.
Yeah, and I love, by the way, all those videos that you do, and again, all that movement. And I mean, I cannot do that with one hand. I mean, that's awesome. I got to figure that out. So, and then one thing that people might be going through, right? And you obviously have gone through a lot of different things through your life and have been able to overcome those things, right? So what would be one advice that you can tell our listeners in terms of if they're going through whatever challenge they might be going through right now, they can do to start overcoming that challenge?
So it's going to be really different for everyone, obviously. But one thing I will say, especially about the current milieu, is we're in a time where things are of heightened uncertainty, right? There's always an uncertainty in the world. That is part of the human experience. But right now things are very precarious and we don't know where they're going to go. And I think that creates a lot of anxiety for people. So what I would say is, I know it sounds cliche, but it's really so true, is to find something that you have some control over and that inspires you, something you look forward to. So that's one of the things in my framework. I talk about creating challenges that offer something you can look forward to. There's a really interesting statistic, and I don't remember the exact number, but it said that having just one, like wanting to know what's going to happen on a television show next week is enough to save somebody from committing suicide. That's so profound.
Wow.
So as human beings, we're forward seeking, right? We want to know what's going to happen next. We're looking to the future. And so if you can take some control over something in the future, that's going to inspire hope. And hope is what propels you forward. And that's another really interesting concept, is I think people don't realize that hope is something you can learn. And hope actually comes out of hardship, because that's when you're seeking it, right? When things are all fine and dandy, you may be optimistic, you may be, happy, but you don't really need hope. Hope is knowing that you have power over something in the future. So that's what I would say to people, is really to boil it down to that. Find something you have some control over that gives you hope. And I personally, you tell people to use movement as a tool for that, because I have control over that. I'm going to get some movement in my day. That's something, you can build a habit. I don't have control over the outcome of that. I have control over the fact that I'm going to do something today.
Right.
And that itself is really empowering. So that's what I tell people.
I love that. Definitely find something that you can control. And it's true, because sometimes we tend to forget about that, and we tend to focus on the things that we cannot control. So rather than focusing on things that we don't want, let's focus on things that we do want. And I love how just putting that together, it definitely can help you out. Courtney, I had a really good time. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners and viewers?
No, I think we covered it. I had a really great time. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for being here on the show. Really appreciate you and having you share your knowledge and your story with us.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. And for the rest of you guys, please make sure you share, like, and comment on this podcast post. We can be found at every platform. Please make sure, again, that you share this and subscribe to this channel and this podcast. I'll see you guys at the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Have a good time. Bye.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.